It happened a few winters ago. About 6 months after my divorce was officially done, I realized I seriously needed a fresh start. Back then, my girlfriend Christina suggested we go somewhere quiet, somewhere completely different from the mess I had been dealing with. We ended up finding a rental by a lake in upstate New York. I didn't overthink it, I just booked it for a week. And honestly, the place was exactly what I needed. A modern but cozy house right next to the lake, surrounded by woods. There were only a few other houses along the shoreline, and most of them were empty. It wasn't peak season, and I actually liked that. I wanted distance from everything, from everyone. The host wasn't going to be there, but he sent clear instructions where the keys were, how things worked, just the usual Airbnb details. We arrived in the morning, and the moment we stepped up to the front door, something felt off. There was a small package sitting right on the steps. Just waiting. No return address, nothing official. Only a short handwritten note. Enjoy your stay. Make sure to stay warm. At first, it felt kind of sweet, almost welcoming. But then we opened the package. Inside, there was something strange, a tiny box of matches. We looked at each other for a second. It didn't really make sense, but we brushed it off as some kind of welcome gift. Odd, sure, but harmless. Christina laughed and joked that people in upstate areas are always a little weird. I laughed too. And just like that, we ignored it. The next 2 days were exactly what we had hoped for. Long walks through the snow, warm drinks near the fireplace, complete silence all around us. It felt peaceful, almost too perfect. By the way, the snow had been falling constantly since the day we arrived. Not a full blizzard at first, there wasn't much wind, but enough to cover everything in a clean, untouched white layer. It made the whole place feel isolated, cut off from the world. Perfect. Let me explain the house a bit, because this matters. The bedroom we were staying in was on the second floor. It had huge windows right in front of the bed, facing the lake. The glass, or maybe the roof, felt thin because at night we could actually hear the soft tapping of snow hitting it. It was quiet calming. There was also a skylight above us. So when we lay down, we could see the dark sky and the falling snow. It was beautiful, too beautiful. Then came the third night. Sometime after midnight, I suddenly woke up. At first, I didn't even know why. The wind had picked up and the snowfall had become much heavier than before. It was starting to look more like a real blizzard now. Then I heard it again, a sound. Very faint, almost hidden under the noise of the storm. But something about it didn't feel right. It didn't sound natural. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the snow. It was something else, something mechanical. That's when it hit me. This sound didn't belong out here. My heart started beating faster. Slowly, trying not to make any noise, I got out of bed. I made sure not to wake Christina. And step by step, I started moving across the room toward the sound. I slowly looked out the window, and what I saw was the last thing I ever expected. A snowmobile. It was moving slowly across the frozen lake. Now, I know that's not something unusual. People ride snowmobiles on ice all the time. But at that hour, in the middle of the night, with a storm getting worse, it didn't make sense. The snow was falling much heavier now, so I couldn't see everything clearly. Still, I could make out the shape. The driver was moving carefully, like they weren't fully trusting the ice beneath them. Then suddenly, they stopped. Completely. I stood there watching. The person got off the snowmobile and started waving their arms, fast, desperate. It looked like they were shouting something, but the storm swallowed their voice. I couldn't hear a word. And then something hit me hard. They were facing our house, directly. My chest tightened. How could they know we were here? That didn't make any sense. There was no way. But no matter what, one thing was clear: they needed help. I quickly turned, woke up Christina, and told her what I was seeing. Then I got dressed fast, rushed downstairs, and stepped outside onto the deck. The cold hit me instantly. Even with layers on, it felt like it went straight through me. And then another shock. The person out there was a woman. I could hear her now. She was screaming for help, her voice breaking in the wind. "Thank God someone's there!" She kept repeating it again and again. Then she said something that made everything worse. She said she had lost her little boy somewhere in the snowstorm. Her voice sounded panicked, almost out of control, like she was on the edge. At that point, there was no question. If a child was out there alone in that weather, he wouldn't survive long. I tightened my boots and started heading toward the lake. telling Christina to stay inside. As I got closer to the woman, I began noticing more details. She was wearing a heavy fur coat wrapped tightly around her body. Her hair was pulled back into a neat, tight braid. The ice beneath us was solid, completely frozen. There was no sign of cracks, no weak spots. That gave me a little relief. At least there was no way a child could have fallen through. That much was certain. As I moved closer, she started explaining. She said her son had run away from home and she had been searching for him. That didn't sit right with me. I paused for a second. I had expected something else, something more logical, like maybe he had fallen off the snowmobile without her noticing. But even that thought suddenly felt stupid. How do you not notice your own kid falling off? That didn't make sense either. It was like my mind was finally catching up, like the adrenaline had been blocking my thinking until now. Something about this whole situation felt wrong, very wrong. I was just about to ask her more questions when she said something that made my entire body freeze. She asked me, "Did you still get those matches?" And in that moment, I could tell she was smiling. For a second, I didn't even understand what she meant, but deep down I knew. And in that moment, everything suddenly made sense. The matches. That package we found on the first day, the note, it wasn't from the host. It was from her. She had been there before us. Before I could even react, before I could step back or say anything, she slipped her hand inside her coat and pulled out a gun. My body went cold. She pointed it straight at me and told me to hand over my wallet and my phone. I didn't argue. I didn't think. I just gave them to her. There was no other option. The whole thing from the moment she pulled the gun to the moment it was over didn't even last 30 seconds. Not even that. Then, without saying another word, she turned around, got back on the snowmobile, and disappeared into the storm, just like that. Gun into the whiteout. For a second, I stood there frozen. Then it hit me. I turned and ran toward the house as fast as I could, my feet slipping slightly on the ice. I kept shouting the whole way, "Christina! Call the police!" By the time I got inside, breathing hard, she was already on the phone with them. I locked every door immediately and started pacing around the room, my hands still shaking. I couldn't stop looking outside. Part of me kept expecting to see that snowmobile come back, circling the house. But it never did. The police finally showed up about an hour later. By then, the fresh snow had already covered everything, every track. Every sign she was ever there gone, like she never existed. Christina was completely shaken, almost hysterical. But me, I was angry. I came out here for peace, and this is what happened. Still, I held on to one small hope. There was no clear way for her to just appear on the lake like that. I thought maybe the police would find the snowmobile somewhere nearby abandoned. But I was wrong. They searched the area and eventually found an old boat ramp on the far side of the lake. That was their best guess. She came from there. I pushed them to keep looking, but they told me what I already knew. There wasn't much they could do. Even if she dropped something, it would be buried under all that snow. Gone. With Christina's help, I tried tracking my phone. But by then, it was already offline, completely dead. The only good thing in all of this was that the Airbnb host refunded the entire trip. When I spoke to him, he sounded honest. He said he had no idea about any package, no matches, nothing. But something about that didn't feel right. How did that woman know we would be there? How did she plan all of this so perfectly? And why go through all that effort just to steal a wallet and a phone? I couldn't shake the feeling that the host might be involved somehow. But I had no proof. I even reported it to Airbnb, but they were exactly as helpful as you'd expect. Useless. I'll admit, I've always been a bit paranoid. And for a long time after that, I kept thinking about my ex-wife. I even started to believe she might have had something to do with it. It still makes me angry just thinking about it. I can almost picture her laughing about it. But deep down, I know that's not likely. Still, none of it makes sense. Even now, I can't understand why someone would go that far, plan something like that just for a wallet and a phone. Unless there was something seriously wrong with her, or maybe she enjoyed it. My family owns a lake house up in Northern California, a place we usually escape to for just a couple of weeks each summer when the weather is at its peak. It's 2 stories tall and has an attic. When my younger sister and I were kids, we'd sneak up there with sleeping bags and pretend we were camping. Sometimes, we even brought our puppy along. There was one tiny window in the attic that let us peek down at the lake. Watching people from up there always felt thrilling. As we hit our early teens, the attic became too cramped for both of us. That marked the end of our little camping adventures. Looking back, it felt a bit sad, but growing up is unavoidable. After our grandparents passed away, my parents inherited the rest of their furniture. The bigger pieces fit in the house, but the attic slowly became stuffed with smaller hand-me-downs. My parents couldn't bring themselves to throw any of it away. It was all that remained of Nana and Pop. Filling the attic with their belongings felt bittersweet, but also comforting, like pieces of them were still silently watching over us. Honestly, that period felt like the final chapter of my childhood, and I know my sister would agree. As we grew older, visiting the lake house became more difficult. Between my studies and my parents' work, the most we could manage was maybe 1 week together there each year. My parents didn't want to rent the house out during the months we weren't around. They worried about their antiques being damaged or stolen by careless tenants. For most of the year, the house sat mostly empty, with only the landscapers keeping it minimally maintained. Then, a few years ago, my parents met a local elderly veteran who had become an antique restoration specialist. Eventually, they signed a year-long lease with him, trusting he wouldn't damage the place. He was small and physically disfigured, with white hair and a coarse, greasy beard. His voice was rough and gravelly, and we all found him unsettling. Still, my dad connected with him over their shared military background. He told us that people like this man deserved a chance after sacrificing so much for their country. We didn't have much say in the decision, but honestly, this old man gave me the creeps. My sister and I weren't thrilled either, especially since it meant missing our summer at the lake house. But our parents could use the extra money for college expenses, so we reluctantly accepted it. Even though they trusted him to care for the house, my parents checked in indirectly. The landscapers would occasionally probe to ensure he hadn't fallen or run into trouble. These subtle checks felt like the perfect compromise. We weren't intruding, but we had peace of mind. For a crusty old man, a few casual questions from landscapers likely didn't matter, and he wouldn't have been able to maintain the house alone anyway. My dad figured the rent covered the maintenance, so everything seemed fine. That illusion shattered when the landscapers called my mom with alarming reports. While working in neighboring yards, they had often spotted him acting strangely on the porch, staring at children by the lake. They also saw other disturbing behavior, things I can't even repeat. My mom, always protective, was horrified. The idea of a disfigured old man watching children in our family lake house was unbearable. For months, she lectured my dad nonstop, insisting it was irresponsible to let a potential predator stay there. I still remember her screaming at him, her voice shaking with anger. Eventually, my dad couldn't handle it anymore. When the year-long lease ended, he had to let the man go. Out of respect for his veteran status, my dad tried to handle it gently. He lied, telling him that the house would undergo repairs, leaving it without electricity or plumbing for months. The man left quietly, without much of a fuss, and the nightmare finally ended. It wasn't like my parents had made a fortune off renting the place. They assumed he'd manage to find another spot without trouble. My mom kept telling my dad to stop worrying so much about him. She just wanted him gone as quickly as possible. We even paid the landscapers a little extra to help him pack up his belongings. Honestly, I was relieved too. Having such a strange man with near unlimited access to our house had always felt wrong. About a year later, my younger sister graduated college, and my parents finally grabbed the chance. They used their sick days and flew us out for a summer trip to the lake house. By then, our family had a new black lab mix named Bear, whom my sister hadn't met yet, so she was beyond excited. I'll skip the minor details, but by the time we got to the house, the sun was just dipping below the horizon. We decided to leave Bear inside while we went into town for dinner. The house wasn't stocked with groceries, so we didn't have much choice. That's when I first noticed Bear acting off. His ears were up, his body tense, pacing like he was waiting for something. I told myself it was just the stress of travel and shrugged it off. We were gone only a short while, enough to eat and let the heat of the day fade. But the moment we stepped back inside, the air felt wrong. Something was seriously off. Before I could even speak, I saw Bear. He was lying at the foot of the stairs, panting hard, and my sister screamed. Blood was smeared across the floor beneath him. My mom immediately pulled out her phone, presumably to call 911. Without a word, my dad grabbed a knife from the kitchen. I followed him, and together we moved slowly, searching the house for the intruder. When we reached the top floor, my dad motioned for me to stop. It took me a moment, but then I realized what had caught his attention. The attic hatch was open. Not fully, just cracked, but enough for a faint flashlight beam to shine down. I won't lie, I was frozen with fear. If it hadn't been for my dad, I don't know what would have happened. Without hesitation, he yanked the hatch open and climbed the ladder. I didn't follow. I was too terrified. I listened, expecting a struggle, a fight, something, but all I heard was silence. Moments later, my dad climbed back down, strangely calm. He whispered that it was our old tenant. I could tell he was struggling, torn about what to do next. Then my mom came running upstairs. When she understood what had happened, she screamed at the top of her lungs. My dad had wanted to let the man go, but my mom wasn't having it. She had already called the police, so the situation was settled. When the officers arrived, they climbed the attic ladder and carried the man down. He looked terrible, weak, and disheveled. My dad's face showed nothing but sympathy, which only enraged my mom. The police found our house key on him, something my mom was furious about since my dad had claimed he changed the locks. Bear survived, though he was badly injured. Despite everything the man had done, my dad refused to press charges, no matter how much my mom or sister begged him to. It sparked one of the biggest fights my parents ever had, and I never understood why my dad showed so much compassion for someone who had literally attacked our dog. This all happened about a year ago, and we haven't returned to the lake house since. I hate to admit it, but this incident seriously tarnished my childhood memories of that place. I can't see myself going back anytime soon.